Picture yourself in a meeting where everyone's waiting for your updates. You rehearse what you'll say about your new project, feeling that familiar tingle of excitement mixed with vulnerability. Then it happens, someone raises an eyebrow, asks a pointed question, or worse, offers that polite smile that somehow makes you feel exposed. Sound familiar? If asking for feedback feels like standing naked in a snowstorm, you're not alone. But what if I told you that the discomfort you feel isn't a sign you're doing something wrong? It's actually your signal that you're about to level up. Today, we're diving into the psychology behind feedback anxiety and, more importantly, 3 research-backed scripts that will transform you from someone who avoids feedback into someone who seeks it strategically. By the end of this video, you'll have the exact words to use, the mindset to adopt, and the confidence to turn feedback from a threat into your secret weapon for growth. Let's start with something that might surprise you. That knot in your stomach when you think about asking for feedback? It's not weakness, it's evolution. Our brains are wired to perceive feedback as potential rejection, which thousands of years ago could mean being cast out from the tribe. Today, that same alarm system fires up when your boss says, "Let's talk about your presentation." But here's what most people miss. The very act of seeking feedback is what separates high achievers from everyone else. According to research from Harvard Business School, top performers ask for feedback 83 more often than their peers. They've learned something crucial: feedback isn't about them being judged, it's about them gathering intelligence. Think about it this way. When you ask for feedback, you're not saying, "Please tell me what's wrong with me." You're saying, "Help me see what you see so I can become even better." It's the difference between defense and offense, between surviving and thriving. Now, let's get practical. I'm about to share 3 scripts that will completely change how you approach feedback conversations. These aren't just nice-sounding phrases, they're psychological tools designed to create safety for both you and the person you're asking. Script number 1, the growth frame. Instead of saying, "What did you think of my work?" Try this. "I'm committed to continuous improvement. Could you share one specific thing I could refine to make this even stronger?" Notice what's happening here. You're positioning yourself as someone actively growing, not someone desperately seeking approval. You're asking for specificity, which makes it easier for them to give useful input. And you're framing it around making something good even better, not fixing something broken. This approach works because it taps into what psychologists call the growth mindset, the belief that abilities can be developed. When you lead with growth language, you signal psychological safety. The other person doesn't have to worry about crushing your spirit because you've already shown that you see feedback as fuel, not fire. Script number 2, the collaborative alliance. Try this. "I've been reflecting on this project, and I have a sense of what might need adjustment. I'd love your perspective on where I could focus my energy to make the biggest impact." This is brilliant for several reasons. First, you're showing self-awareness. You already know something could improve. Second, you're positioning the conversation as collaboration, not evaluation. Third, you're asking for strategic input about where to focus, which shows you value their judgment. This script works especially well with managers or mentors because it demonstrates that you're thinking strategically about your development. You're not just asking them to do the thinking for you, you're asking them to help you think better. Script number 3, the specific scenario approach. Here's the magic phrase. "I'm working on specific skill or situation. The next time you notice me specific behavior, could you share what you observe? I'm trying to build more awareness around this. For example, I'm working on my presentation skills. The next time you see me presenting, could you share what you observe about my energy and clarity? I'm trying to build more awareness around how I come across." This script is powerful because it's future-focused and permission-based. You're not asking them to judge your past performance or critique your personality. You're asking them to be your awareness partner going forward. It feels collaborative, not threatening. But here's where most people stumble. They think the hard part is asking the question. Actually, the real skill is in how you receive the response. When someone gives you feedback, your nervous system might activate that ancient rejection alarm. Your heart rate increases, your breathing changes, and suddenly you're not listening anymore, you're defending. Instead, try this simple technique I call the data collection mindset. When feedback starts coming your way, mentally tell yourself, I'm a scientist gathering data about my impact. Scientists don't get emotional about data, they get curious. If someone says your presentation felt rushed, instead of thinking, they think I'm incompetent, think interesting data point, my pace reads as rushed to this viewer. I wonder what specifically created that impression. This shift from personal judgment to objective data is what allows you to actually use the feedback instead of just surviving it. Now, what about when the feedback feels vague or unhelpful? You know those moments when someone says it's good, but maybe it could be different? Here's your follow-up script. That's helpful context. Could you give me an example of a moment when you felt that? I want to understand exactly what you're seeing. Don't be afraid to ask for specificity. Vague feedback helps no one, and most people actually appreciate the chance to be more precise once you invite them to dig deeper. Let me share a story that illustrates this beautifully. I once worked with a marketing director named Sarah, who was terrified of feedback meetings. Every quarterly review felt like a personal inquisition. Then she started using the growth frame approach I mentioned earlier. Instead of waiting for feedback to come to her, she began scheduling monthly strategy sessions with her boss. She'd say, I'd love 15 minutes to get your thoughts on how I can make our campaigns even more effective. Notice the language strategy sessions, not feedback meetings. Making things more effective, not fixing what's broken. Within 6 months, Sarah transformed from someone who dreaded reviews into someone whose boss actively sought her input on other team members' development. The feedback hadn't changed, Sarah's relationship with feedback had changed. Here's something else that might shift your perspective. The people you admire most, the ones who seem effortlessly confident and successful, they're not avoiding feedback, they're harvesting it. They've learned that feedback is like having a GPS for your professional growth. Without it, you're driving blind. But there's an important distinction here. I'm not suggesting you become feedback dependent, constantly seeking validation from others. That's just as problematic as avoiding feedback entirely. What I'm talking about is strategic feedback, seeking intentionally gathering specific input to accelerate your growth in areas that matter to you. Think of it this way. If you were learning to play piano, would you practice for months without ever hearing from a teacher? Of course not. You'd want regular input to correct your technique before bad habits became ingrained. Your professional development works the same way. One more script I want to leave you with, perfect for those moments when you're not sure if you should ask for feedback. I'm at a point where outside perspective would be really valuable. Would you be open to sharing your observations about specific area? No pressure if the timing isn't right. The phrase outside perspective reframes the conversation beautifully. You're not asking them to judge you. You're acknowledging that they have a valuable vantage point you don't have access to. And adding no pressure gives them permission to decline if they're not in the right headspace, which actually makes them more likely to engage authentically. Remember, asking for feedback isn't about exposing your weaknesses, it's about accelerating your strengths. It's not about seeking approval, it's about seeking clarity. And it's definitely not about making yourself vulnerable, it's about making yourself unstoppable. The most successful people you know have learned to see feedback as intelligence gathering. They've trained themselves to get curious instead of defensive, to ask follow-up questions instead of making excuses, and to say thank you for that perspective instead of yes, but. Your relationship with feedback will determine the trajectory of your growth. The people who learn to seek it skillfully don't just get better faster, they get better at getting better. And that's a meta skill worth developing. So here's your assignment for this week. Pick one person whose perspective you value and use one of these scripts to start a feedback conversation. Start small, stay curious, and remember you're not asking to be judged, you're asking to be helped. If this shifted something for you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. What's one script you're excited to try? And if you found this helpful, sharing it helps us reach more people who might need to hear this message. You can find additional resources on effective communication and growth mindset research in the description below. There are some fascinating studies on feedback psychology that are worth exploring deeper. Remember, growth happens at the intersection of courage and curiosity. You already have both. Now you have the tools to use them strategically. Come as you are, leave with something deeper.